Welcome back to the Leading Detection podcast, where fraud fighters come to talk technology. I'm your host, Matt, aka the Fraud Detection Recruiter. Today, we've got a cracking little episode. We are joined by Xavi, who is the Director of Risk at Signified, as well as holding a seat on the European Advisory Board for the Merchant Risk Council. So, what are we talking about today? It's not long since we got through Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and Xavi is coming to give us a few updates and what he saw, the observations that him and his team saw across the e-commerce merchants that he works with. Some really, really good insights to share there, and of course, an update on fraud as well, and what that means from the observations that he's been seeing, what the shift has been across the board, and how the preparations that they've been working on for months now help them in this peak season. And we'll touch on some predictions as well, and what Xavi thinks that we should keep an eye on as we go into 2026. I've had great fun in recording. I hope you enjoy it too. Yes, welcome back to the Leading Detection podcast. And yes, we have a holiday season update. We are joined by Xavi. We have some good fun today. Welcome, and thank you for joining us, Xavi.
Hey, thanks for having me here, Matt. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so we're going to dive into a bit of an update. So it's been Black Friday and Cyber Monday. A lot's been going on. You've got a great vantage point in your position, so it's going to be a good chat this evening. What are we going to be covering? What have you been seeing?
Yeah, I mean, let's dive right into kind of like what we saw. We're just coming fresh out of Black Friday, Cyber Monday, so it's pretty cool to kind of like give the initial, observations that we saw, since since our minds are still kind of like fresh into it. So I think like the first of all, according to Signified's data, when we did like our analysis, pretty much like right after Cyber Monday, we saw one of the clearest signals from the peak season was just how mobile first shopping has become. Like across the weekend, I'm referring to the Cyber Weekend here, over 70% of all orders were carried out on mobile devices, which is a sharp reminder for us that the phone now is the primary storefront for most consumers. I mean, people scroll through deals on the sofa, they were in transit, they were at work, or even in store while comparing prices on the fly. Mobile wasn't just dominant, it was pretty much like effortless. Customers, they really moved fluidly between browsing, wish listing, and purchasing without switching devices or channels, making the mobile journey pretty much like the heartbeat of Black Friday and Cyber Monday, I would say. For fraud teams and solution providers, this shift really reinforces a simple truth, if you ask me. If your model's UX and authentication flows aren't tuned for mobile first behavior, you're already behind. So that's on one side of the thing. But when we digged into a little bit further, we saw the fascinating contrast, because when it then came to AI-driven search, and agentic shopping in interactions, the behavior pretty much flipped, because while only 30% of the purchases overall happened on the desktop, nearly 90% of AI search initiated orders were placed from a computer. That tells us something pretty important about where early agentic commerce lives today. Consumers, they still treat AI-assisted shopping, whether prompt-based or comparison-driven or conversional search, as a desktop activity, almost like research, or planning, rather than a pure transaction flow. I mean, I guess like users, even myself as a user, they use larger screens, multiple tabs, and more controlled environments to explore product options with AI assistance. And yet, despite being desktop heavy, these AI search orders, they showed significantly stronger conversion rates. So meaning that once users engage with agentic style discovery, they were far more likely to follow up through with a purchase.
Right. So if someone's on the mobile, it's kind of a bit of entertainment almost. But if someone's on an AI supported platform, their intent is stronger. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely right. I mean, taking it a step further, in collaboration with a few merchants, we didn't just see more conversions, we also saw richer behavior. I mean, AI assistant shoppers, I mean, the whole industry is talking about it right now.
Yeah.
I mean, the AI assistant shoppers, they tend to spend more time evaluating product attributes, comparing alternatives, and refining their queries. And they behaved less like impulsive buyers and more like informed, guided decision makers. This is where early signs of agentic commerce, they really start to show now. Shoppers are increasingly comfortable letting digital agents narrow the field, pretty much, explain trade-offs and surface the best match. We also saw other early signals, more of session activity with no visible cart interaction because agents were building carts in the background,
Mhm.
and more product comparisons happening in just a few clicks, and patterns that look like less human browsing and more like structured goal driven navigation. So these are subtle shifts that hint at what's coming next, right? Like a world where customers no longer manually search or scroll or filter, but instead they delegate that heavy lifting to AI systems that
Mm.
shop with them or for them.
So it's a glimpse
Yeah.
into the future, really, because
Yeah.
this is all new. It's interesting that the orders that were actually placed were quite high, because I would have thought it would be quite
Yeah.
experimental at the moment.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it still is experimental, so to speak. I'm also like personally experimenting still in terms of like what are the flaws, what are some of the
Mm.
cool stuff. I mean, as a user as well, looking at things from a time saving perspective. Why not use AI for
Yeah.
your purchases if it's already there? So yeah, I think we're still in early stages, but that like kind of really hints us towards like what's coming in 2026 and what it's all about.
So we've got kind of two different demographics of people here. We've got
Yeah.
the mobile, who it is entertainment. They're scrolling on the sofa. They're being targeted by marketing campaigns, and that's how they're finding the product, versus the researcher who wants value, wants best in class. And there's quite a clear difference in these two people.
Absolutely. Yeah. 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 I mean, it's interesting. There's definitely, I think at some point when the whole agentic commerce becomes a little bit even more seamless and more understandable to people, I'm not saying that like it will, move more towards like the mobile storefront. I'm
Mhm.
definitely expecting that as well. But this is just like a tidbit that we saw very interesting when we dug into the data from Black Friday for this year specific. Maybe
Mm.
next year it's different. We'll see.
We'll have our own little Black Friday
Yeah.
assistant doing all the
Yeah.
shopping for us, and
Yeah.
Christmas will be sorted by
Yeah.
the first week in December, which would be
Exactly.
which would be great for me. I've been
Yeah. I'm expecting it. So
I've been known to be a Christmas Eve shopper in the past, so maybe it's film for people like me. So we've got some context there. The leading detection podcast, of course, is more focused on fraud.
yeah.
These figures, insights that we've got from Black Friday and Cyber Monday, on the surface, what does that mean for fraud? What does 70% of orders being on mobile, what does that mean for risk? And then we can go on to the AI search initiated orders as well after that. But starting with mobile, what's that mean for fraud?
I mean, what a mobile exactly means for, do you mean, Matt, like what it means for e-commerce in general?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there is like, if you look at it from an e-commerce particular lens, my team, we're pretty much like data heavy. So we look at things from a data perspective. Are the purchases being made from a mobile or from a desktop? It can bring some nuances in how you look into certain transactions when it comes to data signals, right? So this is kind of like how we approach things. Think here about like the copy paste behavior, something like that, right? Like the copy paste behavior is a little bit more, seamless on a desktop rather than on a mobile phone. So these are sometimes like subtle hints that helps us to segment, good traffic from bad traffic. It's not like always bad if information is being copy pasted over. I mean, a lot of in the industry, we're talking about like, hey, if there's bot activity, look into the traffic. If it's copy paste, if it like hints to copy paste information, it might like, lean towards bad. But
Mm.
us as users, we also leverage like a copy paste information, especially when it's on the desktop.
Yeah.
Maybe less likely on a mobile device where people still type things in or use the autofill mode. So these are some kind of like subtle hints and patterns that we observe that we leverage into our data analytics. So yeah, I mean, we both want to, whether it's desktop or mobile, we absolutely we want to make sure that the experience is as seamless as possible and don't give people the friction that they can have by being falsely blocked. And yeah, all of these subtle hints can hint us towards like better optimizing the.
Nice. And so
Yep.
that's on mobile. We spoke about the 30% of purchases happening on desktop, and then we spoke about 90% of AI search initiated orders as well. It's early days in this space, but what does detecting bad actors on the AI initiated search, how does that come about? We spoke about mobile devices, so desktop and tossing out the bad actors between those. What does it mean? It's early stages, but what does it mean for the AI initiated searches?
If the question is like what that means for the AI initiated searches, let me see if I understand the question right. Like, so you're asking like, what does it mean for fraud?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, there's kind of like there's still a lot of nuance to it, like how the fraud will will move ahead. If we want to jump like right away in terms of like what are some of these telltale signs brings us to their predictions, what does it tell us about the future? I think a couple of things, and also when it comes to um AI, I definitely think like if you're asking me about like my 2026 predictions ahead, like I do think like there are a couple of things that will change, and we'll touch on it like a bit later in the podcast as well. But I do think like the biggest shift ahead really lies in agentic commerce and AI driven purchases. Like as digital agents, they start shopping on behalf of customers, really comparing prices and filling cards and placing orders. The fraud landscape in general, it will fundamentally change. Fraudsters, they won't just imitate human shoppers. They will imitate automated shoppers. We'll see the emergence of synthetic good customers, AI like shoppers patterns really designed to appear hyper consistent, low risk, and high trust in the eyes of fraud and models. The challenge what that brings is these patterns, they will look better than real customers. And fraud teams, they will have to build models that distinguish between authentic automation and malicious automation, which is an entirely new category of risk. So yeah, I think that's kind of like the biggest shift ahead as we get like all of these early telltale signs in. But this is kind of like my my 2026 look ahead, my 2026 prediction.
So we've got to add in another segmentation of customers. So fraud models were set up to detect bots, right? That was traditionally.
Yeah.
And now we have to encompass
Yeah.
bots into the good
Yeah, exactly. I
users.
mean, yeah, I mean, I have been in the fraud space for quite some time, and how to say it? Like, we have always associated bot traffic with negative traffic, right? Like, hey, if it's coming in as bot, then it's most likely to be bad. So I think, like, for merchants and solution providers, it's not. I think step one is really understanding, like, is this bot traffic, yes or no? But also the secondary question that becomes increasingly important is it good bot or is it bad bot, right? And so yeah, we'll get like more into that distinguishment pretty heavily as we get deeper into next year.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
certainly early days, and there's a
Yeah.
lot. There's a lot to learn. I don't think
Yeah.
anyone truly knows what will happen, and they'd be a very rich person if they could. So, fraud as a central topic. Going back to that, I know that we've spoken previously about the shift from smarter fraud to just
Yeah.
more volume
Yeah.
of fraud. So, yeah, remind the listeners of what we spoke about previously and what we mean by that.
Yeah, I can actually, connect it with what we saw with the cyber weekend, because it's pretty much like interesting what we saw. So this year's Black Friday and Cyber Monday, they didn't really deliver the classic surge of high velocity fraud that many merchants brace for. Instead, what stood out was the quality of fraud, not the quantity. So fraudsters, they have realized that large, noisy spikes, they trigger alarms instantly. So they've did brute force for precision. The defining theme of this peak season for me was really sophistication, really cleaner identities, better crafted account takeovers, and low volume testing that avoids like tripping traditional thresholds. Fraud didn't really explode in volume. It really evolved in precision. That's one. And the second piece is that fraudsters, they also recognize that peak season traffic gives them the perfect camouflage, right? Like when
Yeah.
sales volume double or triple, risk teams and models, they are also under pressure to approve faster, decline carefully, and avoid unnecessary friction with legitimate shoppers. I mean, for a lot of merchants, this is their prime time of the year where each order really counts.
Yeah.
That rush creates opportunity. So attackers, they can slip smaller, smarter attempts into the stream without standing out. And instead of hammering checkout pages with cart testing or obvious bot activity, they mimic genuine customers, realistic browsing patterns, normal device fingerprints, familiar delivery addresses, and during peak season, blending in then breaking in. So two main themes that we saw as a summary is like one, they move more towards precision than the high velocity fraud, and second, they leverage the momentum. They really blend in the peak season traffic, in the surge of traffic. So why is this? That then makes also detection harder, right? Like this
Yeah.
result is that the landscape where fraud is harder to isolate because it behaves so much like real shopper traffic. With legitimate transactions surging, the signal to noise ratio, it's tilted heavily in the attacker's favor.
Mm.
We actually saw the warning signs weeks before peak, and that's kind of like my message to the other fraud fighters as well. Like, leverage the warning signs the weeks before peak as much as possible. Like, look at like the early card testing activity that pretty much like spiked from our side in October and early November.
Oh, well.
Yeah, so like really leveraging that momentum, and that helps you to move from noisy rapid fire bursts to slow distributed tests that they're using, and helps you also to kind of distinguish like the bad behavior from the normal customer behaviors. I think like it was a preview of what was coming. Fraudsters, and I'm referring to the previous card testing or the
Yeah.
previous data breaches. Like for me, it was a preview of what was coming. Fraudsters were getting quieter, cleaner, and more patient. Knowing this, many merchant and risk teams really prepared differently this year. They tightened behavior models, they froze risky rule changes ahead of peak, and doubled down on the network level data to detect really subtle cross merchant patterns. And even with these preparations, the attacks weren't bigger as mentioned. They were just simply better hidden, designed to slip through exactly when merchants had the least room to investigate.
Mm. So the volume hasn't necessarily significantly increased from initial. More sophistication has just it's been quality over quantity.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, comparing it to last year, I mean, think about it like this from a fraud perspective, right? Like if you have like stolen cards or account takeovers that we can also talk about next, because that's also a pretty interesting piece. But if you already have access to an account, or you have access to payment data, you also, as a fraudster, you want to kind of maximize that out. So
Yeah.
how do you do it? Like where we saw last year, multiple mid range basket sizes, more volume, we did see that, like we saw like in general, like higher order amounts being leveraged, right? So they blend in, not extremely higher, but like slightly higher than the average order value
Mm.
basket to kind of continuously maximize the stolen cards that they have. But it just becomes more sophisticated. And so making sure that from a fraud perspective, every order counts. And so, leveraging the stolen information, not for maybe like, 10 different transactions, but like having one single transaction that is executed very good and with a decent order amount included.
Mm. But you mentioned that maybe they've been doing a bit of stress testing previously as well. So looking for pressure points,
Absolutely.
building up to the big day.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that might be a pretty interesting, pivot to the account takeover, because that's definitely interesting. What we are seeing, like from our perspective as well. So the e-commerce world, but especially Europe, actually especially UK as well, they had experienced like a wave of high impact data breaches over the past year. I
Mm,
mean, it's all over the news, right? Like one data breach after the other. And it doesn't come without consequences. So the downstream effects is becoming increasingly clear. We're already heading towards, in my perspective, an account takeover, an ATO boom. But with these data breaches, the fraudsters, they pretty much like have everything now that they need to
mm,
shift their focus from payment fraud to identity takeover. And I would say like that's definitely something that we also saw this peak season, because like the account based attacks, moved from niche threat to a mainstream fraud strategy. The fraudsters, they realized that breaking into a customer's account is far more lucrative. It's far harder for merchants to detect than attacking the checkout directly. So
mm,
with strong authentication and better issuer level controls, reducing that helps to reduce pure payment fraud. And because of that, the attackers are shifting their energy to the identity layer. So think here about password resets, credential stuffing, loyalty points theft, exploiting safe payment options, etc.
mm,
These weren't like smash and grab account takeover attempts. They were pretty much like patient, methodical efforts. Like fraudsters, they use bots to test credentials slowly, mimic normal browser behavior, and leverage previously compromised personal data to appear legitimate. So, and then once inside, they then place high value transactions, high value orders, and drained loyalty balances, or they updated delivery address. You can do pretty much like a lot once you're
mm.
inside an account, right? And all of that while using the customer's clean history as a cover. Because if you think about it, like these all of these users, they have a history on the e-commerce network,
Yeah.
and this is something that they then definitely want to ride on.
So
Yeah.
predictions for next year, maybe identity is going to be a big area of protection for the fraud teams.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, like fraud is no longer a checkout problem. We can also talk about like some of the additional abuse factors as well. But fraud for me is really moving into an identity problem. The real battlefield is shifting further up the funnel into the customer journey itself and the behavioral signals that shape trust long before a payment ever occurs. Fraudsters there are increasingly exploiting the identity layer, because that's where the defenses are the softest. They're going after login flows, resetting flows, loyalty balances, stored payment methods, as mentioned, and anything else that lets them impersonate a trusted shopper.
Mhm.
So checkout fraud is becoming the end of the attack, not the beginning. So it really becomes more interesting for fraud, for solution providers and all of the fellow fraud fighters to kind of like look at fraud more earlier in the funnel, right? Like including the identity piece.
Would you say it's a pendulum that's going to swing back, or is it more of an evolution that it used to be payments, now it's identity, it'll be something else in the future?
Yeah, I think it has always been there, but not at this scale.
Mm,
Now that with the rise of AI and bots and scripted attacks, more credential stuffing is happening, more brute force attack is happening. It has always been there, but not at this scale. I do think that it will swing towards like that piece more now. Also, if you think about it, like why will account takeover continue to dominate? It's not about like payments that are getting weaker, but it's actually because payments are getting stronger. Think here about like SCA and tokenization and
mm,
issuer level risk scoring and network intelligence. It's continuously improving. So fraudsters, they will naturally gravitate to the part of the funnel with the least friction, right? Which is the account, and they'll double down on blending in. So the future of account takeover isn't brute force credential stuffing. It's really carefully choreographed account behavior that mirrors a loyal customer so
mm,
convincingly that models struggle to tell the difference. And expect fraudsters to build profile warm-up tools that simulate browsing, wish list updates, and cart building to prepare the account for high-value attack. So yeah, it's really getting into the account, as mentioned, like warm up the account, and then at some point when you don't expect it, they then attack.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
life's becoming even more digital, right? I mean, I can't even think how many accounts and sign-ins and
Yeah.
different apps that have your payment or your cards on and whatnot. So there's so many options, right? And it's hard to even keep up and notice.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely hard. I mean, you need an account for everything nowadays, right? People still use, similar passwords on multiple websites. So here's where credential stuffing is then succeeding is they find like a password and username combination at some point, and then they brute force it somewhere else, and then they get a hit, and then they print.
Make sure you don't have the same password and the same username across
Oh, yeah.
across your accounts. Other areas as well, something that most people may not think of that's so obvious is promo abuse. I know that we've spoken about that previously too. So talk to us about promo abuse and what you've kind of seen over the last couple of weeks in peak season.
Yeah, so promo abuse wasn't just a side effect of Black Friday this year. It really became a central attack vector as well. I mean, especially during the time of this time of the year with merchants they launching aggressive discounting strategies, fraudsters and opportunistic consumers they treated promotional systems like puzzles to be solved, not
Right.
rules to be followed. So we saw widespread exploitation of new customer discounts, referral bonuses, free shipping thresholds, and even stacking loopholes that were never meant to coexist. So, what
Mm.
changed this year is the level of organization behind it. It's full of like Telegram groups out there now, circulating pretty much like step by step scripts on how to farm coupon codes, rotate identities, or trigger win back incentives. Many attackers weren't even touching stolen payment data. They were just simply weaponizing merchant marketing budgets. And because promo abuse sits in the gray zone between fraud and customer behavior,
Yeah.
it's incredibly difficult for businesses to um, you know to 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 make a change without like adding friction for legitimate shoppers. I have actually a pretty interesting story that we saw recently during the weekend. So
Please.
just to put it into perspective, right? Like this was a very interesting case that we saw. So a beauty brand that we work with, they launched an aggressive referral campaign, and the referral campaign is pretty much like simple. It's like, hey, invite a friend, and you both get like 20 euros
Yeah.
off. Then within days, a cluster of accounts they appeared where each new friend looked suspiciously similar. I mean, same device fingerprints, same IP range, same browsing patterns. One user had created 48 fake friends, each triggering a 20 euro reward. Right?
Yeah.
So what you get is they weren't stealing products, they were minting free money out of thin air.
Hmm.
The fraudster really even automated it all, like a simple script that created a bunch of fake emails, click the referral link, and harvested the discount codes, etc.
Hmm.
All in a couple of minutes. And this single user ended up redeeming nearly 1,000 euros in promo credits in just a couple of hours, right? And imagine doing that like text
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
so this is pretty interesting in terms of like what's happening and how these scams can occur. And the interesting piece is here is that you don't like have in general for some merchants that you don't like have clear signals on when that's happening or why that's happening, right? Like you don't like, for example, have chargeback labels against these.
Hmm.
And for some merchants, it might not be even a line in their PNL, might not be even aware that's happening. But on the other side of the coin, you're bleeding money out sometimes without even realizing it.
Yeah. Do the merchants mind so much if say that, yeah, they're getting a £20 discount, but they're spending money and say they're making profit off each transaction? Does that add to the grey area of is it valuable? Is it not? Do they mind?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm pretty sure like some of the opinions are, different from other merchants, but I think what you can really get is it's polluting your data because
Mm.
think about it like this, right? Like if you think you have on one side you have a particular marketing budget, and that marketing budget is being created by you know by by getting new users in and
Yeah.
more users with a customer lifetime value. But these are not users. These are kind of like fake customers. Sure, they might like do a sale, or they might resell the account, um, because fraudsters, they want to monetize it, and their MO might not be just to use those discount codes to uh, to commit a sale, but they might resell these accounts afterwards to say like, hey, I have an account here for sale, and which already has a discount on it. But going back to the data pollution, is all of these users are popping up as your KPI as new users acquired, but they are not, right? Which is can kind of like hurt your KPIs in the longer run.
So it's a more holistic
Yeah,
view. It's not just about the sales.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
So it was a big weekend, Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Do you think the industry came in a bit more prepared this year than previously, or how did you see it?
Absolutely. I mean, every year is a lesson learned for all of us, and I do think like everyone came into this peak season more prepared than ever. At least that's how I felt about it. There were several strategies that clearly paid off. Black Friday really helped avoid. There were multiple kind of like freezing risky rules, for
Yeah.
example, and that really helped to avoid like last minute swings in approval rates. Many teams also leaned more heavily into behavioral analytics. Behavioral analytics is getting more powerful and stronger, spotting these anomalies in clicks, in browsing paths, in password reset behavior, and loyalty activity long before the checkout stage hits.
Mhm.
Think here also about like network level intelligence that provides especially valuable insights in identifying triangulation clusters or repeat abusers hopping between brands. Network level intelligence also provides critical information in identifying, as mentioned, like those triangulation clusters and repeat buyers. That's something that like no single merchant could potentially see on their own. From a solution provider side, the biggest win really comes from early signal detection and rapid feedback loops. So providers who monitored pre-peak cart testing, as mentioned, were able to alert merchants, weeks ahead of Black Friday, giving them enough time to tune thresholds and adjust model sensitivity or block emergent bad bin ranges. But the strongest solution providers, they don't just score transactions, they act as an intelligence partner, giving merchants real-time dashboards and fraud pressure, issuer declines,
Mm.
account takeover spikes, and cross merchant abuse signs. It's really about like offering that transparency, knowing what's going on. If approval rate goes down, okay, why is this happening? It's happening because of X, Y, and Z, and being able to explain that. But I do think that the real success story came from the tight, proactive collaboration between one side, the merchant, and the solution provider.
Mhm.
It's still a collaborative effort. Like the teams that met weekly during October, shared test results, compared model predictions, and aligned on approval rate strategy constantly outperformed others. I mean, merchants like also feeding to us like their marketing calendars or their promo schedules, and expecting traffic surges into like those are things that really helps
Mm.
to set like both of the sides up for success. So yeah, I think like to sum it up from both sides, for both merchants and solution providers, the biggest win was really about situational awareness. Merchants, they understood the risk decisions, that these decisions don't live in isolation. And
Mhm.
solution providers, they recognize that models perform best when contextualized with business realities, right? Like promotions, logistics, constraints, payment routing choices, customer experience priorities. So that's together, you're able to build a better loop between fraud detection and conversion optimization and real time prevention. So something that simply didn't exist a few years ago, and it's getting stronger every year.
So is fraud just a data problem now? Is it we need to get in as much as possible, get as much context, as much data points, and that's the kind of silo now, the bottleneck?
Yes, a lot of this boils down to data because, machine learning is there's where the future is. You want to make sure that machine learning behavior is getting stronger and the data is the way to do it. But it's not only that, it's also, I do feel that the human in the loop feedback is also very important. Apart from the data, you definitely need to understand like the why and the what's behind the data. And as fraud is continuously to scale, it's also very important to have people pretty much like diving into the data and do the
Yeah.
data storytelling and say, "Hey, these are fraud MOs that we haven't seen before, or these are the new tactics that we see emerging." So for me, it's a combination of data, but also being able to explain the data.
So moving forward then, kind of that's what we prepared for. We spoke about what happened. What about the future? What about predictions? What does this tell us about the future?
Yeah. I mean, if peak season or just 2025 in general taught us anything, it's really, as mentioned before, right? Like fraud is moving from the checkout and is going much deeper into the customer journey.
Mhm.
Account takeover, I touched on it like earlier, that this will continue to dominate as attackers exploit the identity layer. Promo abuse will keep rising as long as marketing teams push aggressive incentives, without guardrails and making sure that there's a continuous connection point with fraud teams as well. The biggest shift will happen also, as mentioned before, with agentic commerce and AI driven
Right.
shoppers on the horizon. Shoppers will start testing ways to blend into automated shopping behavior, creating a new generation of synthetic good users. So that's definitely going to, to close it out is, I think, like next year's peak season won't be defined by whether fraud volume spikes. Fraud volumes are becoming less relevant as fraud strategies.
Mm.
It becomes more fragmented, more kind of like camouflages themselves inside legitimate behavior. So instead, like the winners will be merchants and solution providers who can understand identity, behavior, and
Yeah.
intent, not the point of payment, but throughout the entire digital relationship. So the future of fraud prevention isn't about blocking bad transactions. It's really about recognizing good customers with a level of confidence and granularity we have never needed before.
Put the agentic driven commerce, put the spanner in the works because we don't necessarily know what a good customer look like. Are we going to have to face the fact that fraud fighters might lose a couple of rounds while we kind of understand what's going on? Or are we able to understand it quicker than
Yeah.
previously?
That's a good
What's your
question.
prediction?
It's a good question. I mean, I hope not, but you probably definitely need to. Yeah, I think the industry will definitely will have to take a couple of hits,
Mm.
so to speak, before really understanding, like how this evolves. But let's put it like this: I don't think that the learning will kind of like yeah, we'll have to take in some damage before really kind of generating some learnings, which is not like always a bad thing as long as you learn from it, right? And so, yeah, that's my take on it.
No, it's coming fast. No one knows what's
Exactly.
happening. We have to fail fast and learn quick. Is what's coming. What are you excited about for the kind of next 12 months? What are you looking
Yeah.
forward to?
On the flip side, am excited on the agentic commerce piece, to think about it. Like I do think it's a big piece of like how the industry is moving and behaving. And from Signify's perspective, I do think, we have really started to look into this more already, some significant time ahead. We have built like some additional products around it, some additional features around it, and already incorporated into our model that really allows us to kind of like see the early telltale signs about it. So I do think based on that will allow us to see some new fraud stories emerging,
Mm.
which is an interesting shift. So it's new, but it also definitely excites me.
And anything that's maybe not mainstream, maybe something to keep an eye on. Xavi's kind of one to look out for.
Yeah, definitely keep an eye out on. We haven't touched on it today, and maybe next time when we meet Matt, we can talk a bit about that. But the other thing that I think will also happen is digital wallets and token fraud that's being on the rise. The
Mm.
reason why I say that is because, from my perspective, as traditional card fraud becomes increasingly difficult, I
Yeah.
mentioned it like earlier, tokenization, SEA, issuer level intelligence, improved behavioral models, machine learning. Attackers, they are already pivoting towards like the next obvious frontier, which is
Right.
digital wallets and payments tokens. These systems were originally designed to be safer than raw cards. And in many ways, they are. But I do think in 2026, they will become the new weak links, simply because there are less scrutinized and less understood from a fraud perspective. So fraudsters, they are exploiting already gaps in wallet identity binding, device recognition, token provisioning, and a few merchants, they handle token lifecycle events. So we're seeing already early signs of attackers replaying tokens and hijacking wallet sessions and abusing browser-based wallets with weak authentication and exploiting local payment methods that lack the same global fraud controls and as card networks. So that fraud isn't happening at the payment network; it's happening at the identity layer, right? Again, it comes back to the identity layer, but it's an interesting kind of like piece that we're seeing happening as well. So it's happening at the identity layer that feeds the wallet itself. Think here about the compromised accounts, the cloned device environments, the manipulated wallet profiles, the social engineered OTPs, one-time password approvals. And once a fraudster gains access to a wallet, they inherit a frictionless payment instrument that merchants trust far more than they should. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, looking forward, maybe will be an interesting topic for us to dive separately in as well, because there's a lot to talk about that as well. But I do think 2026 we'll see definitely more and hear more about wallet.
Yeah, you absolutely tease. Just as we're finishing up, you left us on a cliffhanger about what we're going to talk about next time. But yeah, the topics we've spoken about today, super important. And thank you so much for giving almost a real-time update on what happened over the peak season.
You're welcome, Matt. I had fun.
Me too. Xavi, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us. If people want to keep up with what you're doing, any conferences, anything like that, how can they do so?
Sure. I mean, definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn. And the next conference I will be attending will be the MRC conference in London.
Very nice. So if you're there, make sure you reach out to Xavi. Thank you again. And to listeners, until next time, ciao for now.